Hi there, ladies and gentlemen. Today I want to talk about encouraging field fights, which is something that PlanetSide offers and are often the best fights the game has to offer, being dynamic, different, involving all roles and type of vehicle. However, these battles are both fragile and scarce, as they require very kind of precise conditions to start, and they end all too easily. Now, the addition of construction has given us some reason to get out in the field and actually fight there, but often this aspect of the game is utterly ignored by many for a whole load of reasons. Now, however, we can add and improve the game to make these fights start more often and make them a bit more difficult to end. And ultimately, I do think it comes down to three factors. First, there's the reason to actually get out into the field and fight. Second, actually being able to fight there. And third, well, being able to spawn there if you do fight there. And the first thing I want to talk about, therefore, is the reason to fight. Now, currently, ultimately, there's little reason to fight in the space between bases, as all that really matters if you are tactically or strategically orientated, shall I say, is capture points. And if all you care about is kills, then the field is most of the time not where you're going to find them, because, well, people take too long to respawn there, and bases are really where the action is at. Now, as we saw with the Galaxy AMS and also long-range spawn beacons, field fights just turned out to be totally ignored if you could get to a base easily. What we need is a reason to fight in the field beyond simply protecting attacking summoners, which is often boring because sitting in a tank outside of a base cap in the hope that somebody's going to swing by and try and take it out is frustrating and boring. Now, construction hasn't really given this yet, as often hives are again ignored due to a few factors, primarily lack of messaging. I mean, I've been playing the game for 4 years and I look at the map a lot because I'm usually squad leading, but I identify that there are these bases there, but I don't know how much force there's going to be that I'm going to need to try and take there to deal with it. I don't know how many defenders there's going to be, etc., etc. Now, it's also incredibly difficult to take entrenched bases because just a few defenders can make it an absolute nightmare to try and attack because of AI modules which are incredibly strong and repair modules which mean that you can't just smash them down with tanks from range. Now, I've got a few suggestions. First of all is messaging hives to get people out there, and by doing that I'd put VP score on either the HUD, as I've suggested in the past, or in the tab screen. I've got an image in the album linked with some of the HUD improvements as well, but VP is something that I really want to see either on the HUD as an option or in that tab screen, as I've said. Now, I'd also like to see AI, artificial intelligence modules in construction bases tweaked substantially, because at the moment it's just ridiculous. I mean, you walk into as I'm playing a cloak role a lot at the moment, I uncloak and almost immediately I'm gunned down, and it's just they seem to track too quickly, they seem to do too much damage, they also don't seem to miss, and I think they need something, either taking longer to track you, so if you run around they don't hit you as easily like a player would, but also potentially slowing the rate of fire and a few other things that could potentially happen. But yeah, repair modules are also good, and I see where the devs were going with this, making it so that it's very clear that if there's a repair module you can't damage the walls and whatnot, but I do think they are too strong at the moment. Yeah. Now, the next thing I'd like to see is more objectives in the field. So vehicle cap points have been talked about for the the Iconium overhaul, which is sitting on the PTS, which I think is quite an exciting concept. Although having like aircraft that just fly around, cap these things, bother everybody, then disappear again could be frustrating. But we'll see. And I do like the concept. Having more kind of random buildings out in the field, like between Quartz Ridge and Indoor Excavation is also quite nice. That obviously requires a lot of dev time to implement. Big Cortium deposits, which Cericium suggested an awful long time ago for resources in general, I think is also a sound idea because they will drive conflict as well. We've also got things like capture the flag mechanics, which I've got a separate image about, but there's a range of things that could be done there. And also territories just needing resources, and ants could deliver them, and there's lots of ways it could work. Again, I've put out a few concepts of how that could work, which is very similar to what Malone was suggesting way back when he was talking about the resource overhaul and kind of end goals with it. Now, the second thing I wanted to talk about was being able to actually fight in the field. And at the moment, it's quite tricky because it's a very delicate balance again. Because at bases, you've got infantry duking it out. They've got everything's kind of set up for them, and it can be tricky to scare off vehicles. But on the whole, that infantry domain is the bases, and that's fine. But if you're out in the field, aircraft typically dominate infantry until the infantry pull anti-aircraft weapons, which completely deny the area to aircraft wholesale. Vehicles could potentially get taken apart at long range if the infantry are well prepared, or even a small group of them are coordinated with lancers or mana turrets or whatever it is they want to use. And potentially AP tanks can hide off on the hills. I mean, the area around Snake Ravine is kind of infamous for me at least, for all of these kind of problems, because you get AP tanks sitting on the edge of the field, firing and dominating the entire area. And it goes from being a great fight to a slaughter all too easily. Now, there's a few things that could be done here. I mean, initially, and I'm kind of, I don't really want to say it, but AV, long-range AV, particularly the stuff like mana turrets, lancers potentially, and I feel like a trade to say in this, but they could be overpowered, or at least not individually, because getting a kill with lancers is a right problem if you're an individual, but if you've got a group of you, you just see Zergs just evaporate in front of you, which is beautiful and fantastic, but perhaps not the best for the game. Now, also, we could really do with having ground-to-air weaponry, their effectiveness kind of curtailed, so you could have a range of different things happening with this, but I think partially the range of AA from the ground should be limited, a lot more limited than it currently is. I mean, obvious problems there of, say, Liberators or ESFs firing outside of the kind of area you can defend from, and Galaxies sitting on the flight ceiling, dropping people onto targets, which is a problem in its own right, if you ask me. But I do think that ground-to-air weaponry needs to have its range brought down. Potentially seeing flak automatically detonating, as a few people have talked about in the past, once it gets to a certain range. Lock-on weapons perhaps being the kind of the longer range option, but still having some kind of making them better at close range but worse at long range is what I kind of want to see there. And so infantry can defend themselves, ground forces can defend themselves against aircraft, but they can't completely deny an entire area. Now, I'd also like to see quick defences able to be deployed, as the current constructions take too long to get an ant, get the resources, get them set up, just for people not to actually turn up. And I really like the concept that Rel's got into the test server, it appears, recently, with the deployed shield. Other things, of course, could be implemented as well. Taller shields I'd like to see. I'd like to see the dome shields that he's kind of shown, or parasols, as people referred to them as when I made the concept art in the album as well. So there's lots of things that could be done. I've always suggested the Atlas assault vehicle, which is basically just a vehicle which is mobile cover, and it could look like the one in the concept I've made, or it could be a big bubble shield like in that first Star Wars film of the prequels. That could work. Which gives people the option to move across no man's land in relative safety. Now, the final thing I was going to mention was actually being able to spawn there, because ultimately, if you're attacking a base, you need Sunderers. You can squad spawn into squad transport vehicles as well, which is an option, but on the whole, you need Sunderers if you're actually going to take a base, usually. Now, the problem that we've got is that very few people, unless you're in a massive Zerg, are going to bother setting up Sunderers away from the front line and the sweet spots. You might get 2, you might get 3, but any more than that is dicey. And ultimately, a single AP Lightning, Liberators, etc., can take him out pretty speedily, and that's an issue, because attacking in this game is still too difficult, even with reduced cap times on 3-point bases and everything else. It's just too difficult to attack bases, and so you see lots of people just not bothering and just bouncing around from defence to defence. What we need is more spawn options, and at the moment, we don't have them. Okay, beacons are flimsy. They only work for obviously the squad, and they die all too easily to EMPs or whatever else could come their way. Now, what I suggest is that potentially you could put hard spawns in the world, like the old Planetside 1 towers. I know Mulorn obviously has talked about having a hard spawn for bases, and we see this with the amp station, with some amp stations currently, which is all well and good, but that does also mean you can bypass the field fight entirely by just going and taking that capture point, and therefore earning that spawn point, which can be a problem. At amp stations, it's not too much of an issue because you've got a relatively short distance between the satellite bases and the main base itself. But for other bases, I don't think that could work quite as well as we want it to. Now, I'd also like to see engineer and medic spawn points. Perhaps the engineer ones could be a bit tougher, the medic ones could be a bit flimsier, a bit more temporary. They could have limited use. They could be set for the squad, however you want to do it. Okay, I've got a separate image, of course, with this on as well. Through the command system. Potentially we could see leaders, squad leaders, platoon leaders calling in spawn points like sunderers into certain areas, perhaps not being allowed into no deploy zones, things like that, the usual kind of restrictions. And again, I've got an image with a few of those ideas on, and Steel Rain, which again I've got a concept for in the album, which I'll link in the description of this video, because that again gets people spawned, gets them around their squad leader, which is, in my opinion, really important. And ultimately, these three different kind of aspects of it, and the suggestions that I made, hopefully would make field fights more often, happen more often, be more sustainable, and ultimately give people the flow that a lot of people desire from this game, instead of just bouncing around frontline defending bases or trying to attack a base and then just disappearing off somewhere else. Because ultimately, people want that continuation. They want that kind of campaign, as it were, and having to redeploy out across the map spoils that, honestly. So, if you like this video, please obviously give it a like, subscribe if you really want. I make videos from time to time, but not often, but feel free if you'd like to. But other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you planet side.